Does your neighborhood still define you? I'm Stephen Tocher, and I've helped thousands of people over the past 20 years, and I'd like to help millions more over the next 40 when it comes to their faith, their family, their fitness, and so much more. So I was born into a very interesting situation. My parents, they didn't have a lot of money. My grandparents had a decent amount of money. And so, in time, I saw two sides of the world. I saw one side of the world that was extremely lavish. I would go to cottages. I would hang out with some very interesting, affluent people, business owners. And at other times, I would be, most of the time, I was pretty much living in what you would call a quote unquote ghetto or some of the worst of the worst conditions in a first world country setting. Now, it wasn't Chicago, it wasn't maybe the Bronx, it wasn't Compton, and for Canadian standards, it's again not as horrible as many places, even in North America, much less in the world, right? But again, a gun is still a gun, a bullet is still a bullet, a knife is still a knife, drugs are still drugs, and people died a fair bit in my neighborhood. I saw a lot of SWAT teams and stuff like that, especially when I was really young. And inevitably, my parents did move out and move to a bit of a nicer area at first, and then progressively it got worse quickly. But I just remember that interesting dichotomy, and I'm pretty sure that I'm not in the full-on minority here, but I definitely know that I'm in the few and far between when it comes to having family members of different socioeconomic situations. I remember going and having sometimes a roast dinner, like a beautiful, delicious pallets of meat in different situations. And then I remember coming home and sometimes we had almost nothing to eat. It was very, very hard for my little four or 5-year-old brain to wrap my head around these first visuals and images of, again, going to this lavish cottage and then, coming back home and, going through my very worn out clothes. And so there was this unique position that I was put in at a young age to really feel people in different classes, in different communities, and be what Paul says in the Bible, to be all things to all people. Like, again, as I've said in the past, my ancestry.com confirms it and stuff like that, though I've done a few genetic tests, and I'm at least Scottish, German, Guyanese, Indian. And then if you go back another realm or another scope, I've got Bengali in there, I've got Sinhalese, I have what's it called? I have Swedish, Russian. There's I think some kind of gypsy in there. And anyway, there's a bunch of other cultures and backgrounds in my genetic pools, which makes me the perfect mutt and also a person who can relate to a lot of different people. Even to the point where sometimes I don't even feel like I have a culture. I'm just a Torontonian, a Canadian, and I'm a Christian, and obviously not in that order. I'm a Christian first, which gives me, again, another unique perspective, because the foods that I had growing up were very unique all the time. And growing up in the city of Toronto, it was, food galore, right? You just have food at every corner, and the different types of foods were quite amazing as well. All right, now time to do these dishes down here. Thought I'd try something new today. Anyway, so the moral of the story is that for a long time, I saw my neighborhoods and I saw the situations that I was put in as these huge negatives and these huge problems. And I would really be bitter or angry with the rest of my family for letting us live in these tough situations. And of course, as I got older, I realized the bondage that a lot of finances can put on you. And I realized how many terrible things people within my family had done or had business deals or just things that they had put up with to keep their wealth. There were some people in my family and my neighborhoods and friends that were able to move up in life, and they did things pretty straight. But usually if people are doing very, very well, I question in most scenarios, in most situations, did they do something kind of sketch to get that ahead in life? Because again, I had quite a disparity in my family and friends and the communities that I was in. So anyway, I say all that to say that growing up, I was always praying for a house. I remember as a little kid, I was always praying for my dad to have a better job, better finances. And this is before both my parents' mental health really went down the tubes. And into my teen years, it was horribly rough. Living with all kinds of critters, almost being homeless, having a bunch of just really horrible things happen to me, which I will get into in the next following weeks, months, and years. But I kind of came to this thought process and conclusion while processing all of this information over the past 40 years, and now being in a situation that I truly love and I'm truly thankful for. And that my neighborhood definitely defined me for a long time. It defined the way I thought about the world. It defined the communities and people groups that I hung out with, and the food that I would have. It just, there was so much within my little tiny ball of influence that was kind of like the Bible for me, or was kind of like my script. And I followed it. I followed it religiously. I got into the wrong crowds at times. I was a product of my neighborhood. I was a product of the way people treated each other, the struggle that was going on. And a lot of other people did the same thing. But the difference was that I thankfully was blessed to see a different side or a different angle of life. And a lot of people don't get that opportunity. And I'm not here to say by any stretch of the imagination that people who live in a specific neighborhood or situation are allowed or are never going to be able to see things from a different position. But I will say it does make it much harder. And that's why I try my best never to judge these people for the situation that they're either blessed to be in, or they're, in some ways it feels like they're cursed to be in. Now, if I'm thinking about from a biblical perspective, I think about all of the situations and circumstances that are similar to mine. You have a situation like a Joseph who is in a quote-unquote loving home, and then all of a sudden he is thrown out to the wolves into a terrible community. His parts of his family assume that he's dead, and he lives in a very tough, horrible living condition for some time, and God ends up working it out for his glory and for Joseph and the whole of Israel's good in the long run. I think of David when he cries out in one of his Psalms, basically, in sin my mother conceived me. Now, we don't know if that was Jacob doing something, not Jacob, sorry. Oh, wow, I just blanked on David's father's name. But Jesse, sorry. If Jesse did something wrong, if his mother did something wrong, we assume it's King David who's writing that psalm as well. So there's some assumptions there. But, obviously, troubled enough situation that, he was left out with the sheep, and no one was really concerned about where he was or what was going on. And obviously, both of those gentlemen had a roller coaster ride of a life. But they had a bit of a dichotomy. There was abundance there, and there was struggle there. And so I know that many of you may not be in the same situation that I am, and maybe for the few of you that are, you'll really understand what I'm going to say, or what I'm getting at. But your neighborhood doesn't have to define you. If it is defining you right now, I would suggest trying to change circles if it's possible. I believe that there is a very big opportunity that life always presents to us. For myself as a Christian, that God will present to us in time. Now, that doesn't mean we have to run away from a quote unquote good or bad neighborhood to explore the world. You know, there's a lot of people who stay in the same neighborhood their whole lives and do a lot of good. But if you are finding that your neighborhood is kind of defining you, maybe into your 20s and 30s, the situation that you've been placed in, the neighborhood, the people, and you don't like where you're going, you don't like the quote unquote neighborhood algorithm, you can break free from that. And again, I say that with maybe sounding a bit hypocritical because I saw other glimpses of what neighborhoods and places were like because of a direct connection with my family. But I want to say that if you start surrounding yourself with other people, you will have a great opportunity. Other people from outside your neighborhood, you will have a great opportunity to see what the world is like and the pros and cons of your neighborhood. One thing I will say about being in a tougher area is that everyone knows each other for the most part, and you bond a lot quicker. You are able to connect with those people, and there's usually dozens, maybe 50, 70% of the people in that neighborhood that are just trying to get by, and they're super nice, super kind. And then when you go to a nicer neighborhood, they're a lot more colder. They're to themselves. They are keeping up with the Joneses. So it's definitely not always peachy on the other side. Uh, it it can be very disgusting if you go from one side to the other. Now, the other thing that's really cool is that growing up, I'm going to sound like an old man here, but growing up, I did not have social media, right? So I did not have access to the internet until I was, I guess, 15 to 17 years old. And then people weren't making blogs and people weren't showing what true life is, or at least close to what true life was for the longest time. So, if you are in that situation where you feel trapped in your neighborhood or trapped in your circumstances, there is trillions of hours of documentation, photos, videos, articles where you can deep dive and learn about what other people are doing and why they're doing it and break out of the norms and the bondages that can be your area, your neighborhood. Anyway, I say all that to say because I just have had some connections and run-ins lately with some people from my older communities and areas, and some of them have broken out and some of them had not. And it hurts to see the ones that are still stuck in their situation in quote unquote richer areas and in poorer, tougher neighborhoods. Ones that, the same type, drugs are very similar no matter how much you spend on them. They're still getting you addicted, they're still hurting you. Alcohol does the same thing across the board, whether you're getting a Colt 45 or drinking a 2-4, or whether you're, drinking Cavassier or whatever drink is famous right now, or a brandy, whatever. The addictions still are the same. It's your ability to break out of the bondage of the day-to-day things that you see. Anyway, I don't know if that hit home for anybody. I just really felt like I needed to share that. And next time I will talk a bit more about what it was like growing up in my area. But yeah, hey, how are you, Michael and Cyrus? Nice to see you. Um, but it was just on my heart. Actually, you know what? I have some time here. I'll continue to talk. If anyone has any comments or questions, please let me know. I remember in that neighborhood, that tough neighborhood growing up, like again, I had that dichotomy of going to my rich family members' homes and going to cottages and then coming back to rats and cockroaches, and living from paycheck to paycheck and being in really, really tough situations, seeing crime happen on a consistent basis. And then on a Sunday, once a month or once every couple months, I'd go to like this 8-bedroom house with, the most delicious food. And, like they'd have like someone who was hired, like a hired entertainment come in for the day. And my brain at such a young age could not understand what was going on here, like why we were living in this tough situation and why everyone else was doing so well. And for the longest time, I would spend hours or days in my room during the summer in particular, crying and asking God, like, I'm 4 or 5 at the time. What kind of things or evil things has my family done that we don't get nice things like everybody else? And like I said earlier, it's interesting because uh, as you get older, you realize that people tend to, not always, but a lot of the times, um, collect wealth by doing shady things. Not always, of course, but some of these people in my family, man, they did some super shady stuff to get what they got. But at the time, if you're going to the wrong church, which we were, your God's blessings is based off of, the good things you get, money and so on and so forth are God's blessings for if you do the right thing. And so things like that just did not compute in my head. So I saw quite the range of issues and problems in my community, in my neighborhood, while on the flip side, seeing these wonders and, being driven around in a Mustang and going on a speedboat. And, you're a kid and you just cannot wrap your head around why there's such a chasm between people's finances and situations. Just checking to see if anyone wrote any comments or questions. So, yeah, it gave me pause to think just about what I saw and what I was able to break out of. So I broke out of two things at the same time. I broke out of this wants to be super rich, and I also broke out of this like want to have the quote unquote ghetto or lifestyle. I saw the horrors of uh, people who were, on serious drugs in all of the stairwells, of my building. When I was a kid, I saw and heard, the violence that was going on in the area as soon as it started to get dark. And again, on the flip side, I would see all of these other people uh, who were just living a lavish lifestyle and had zero compassion and zero care for other people. So it was quite an interesting time, and I've learned a lot from it. And I'd say the main thing that I have learned is that no matter where you are on the scale, you're going to face problems and issues are going to come. You're going to feel like you are alone from time to time. But I just want to say, I don't know who this is reaching tonight, but your neighborhood, your situation that you're in right now doesn't define you. There are tons of tools out there for you to lean into, for you to change your life forever, and you can do it. I believe in you. And if you'd like to chat more at any time, I'm here. Give it a like, a comment, or a sub. That would be amazing on the video here. And I'm thankful to have spent this time with you this evening. If you'd like to watch any other dad doing dishes videos, you can take a look at the video up here. I just want to say thank you again for watching. Have yourself a wonderful day, evening, morning, or night. God bless.